Hello and welcome back to another FPL Forbes video. It's wonderful to have you with me here today. And if you're new, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe, hit that like, as well as that notification bell so you know when we'll be releasing our next video. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 3 very important aspects to planning and succeeding in your 21-22 FPL season based on Opta provided by Fantasy Football Fix. And wait, before you go crazy, this video is not sponsored by Fantasy Football Fix. However, I have found the data and information incredibly helpful in planning my 21-22 FPL season. Now, the 3 aspects, of course, which are very important, which I'll be touching on today, are budget and how that affects your team setup, and of course, wildcards and when you should use them. But let's start off with that first one of budget and how you should spread it across your team. Starting with those 2 goalkeeper positions. Now, throughout the seasons from 2016-2017 all the way up to last season, there's been a variety of strategies used by fantasy football managers. We will be focusing on the top 50 and the top 50 overall Hall of Fame managers and picking out their best strategies, which makes sense, doesn't it? But if we look at the graphic here, basically there's 2 different options. Mainly there is a rotation between a 4.5 and a 4.5 goalkeeper, so 2 4.5 goalkeepers. And what managers tend to do was rotate a home and away fixture between those 2 goalkeepers. Why? Well, the teams in the lower half of the table tend to concede less at home. Of course, with the global pandemic, things did change because there were 0 at times crowds at home fixtures, which makes a big difference. But considering that this year we're going to be seeing the return of fans to stadiums, I think that this is not a particularly bad option to choose. The next option is, of course, using a premium goalkeeper priced between 5 and 5.5. And in this way, you have a stick and forget mentality. Your second goalkeeper normally goes for 4 million. In essence, having the same spend, but just 2 different strategies. Now, moving on to your defenders, of which we have to choose 5. What tends to happen, as you have seen in the previous video talking about formations, if you haven't, go ahead and just right click, open in a new tab for that video. But what managers tend to do is play 3 at the back. And those 3 picks tend to be premium picks, anywhere between the range of 5 to 5.5 and more. What we saw, or what I have seen from the Opta stats, as you can see on the statistics here, is that they tend to go for a 6.5, a 5.5, and a 5 million 3 option spread. The remaining 2 defenders, depending on what you would like to do, is going for 2 4.5 option picks. Now, this strategy is not for everyone. Some managers have done a 4 and a 4, is filling out that bench for the other 2 options. But when you build in that game week 1 squad, it tends to be easier to find another 4.5 defender who perhaps may be outscoring your 4.5 defender that you might have in the squad, which means it's easier to rotate your squad in those early weeks instead of having to take hits, i.e. changing out 2 players in order to afford another 4.5 million defender. Another key is, of course, finding a very good 4.5 million option, because if you do, the increase in the price means further down the line, perhaps when you might be wildcarding, which we'll be talking about at the end of this video, is changing that 4.5 say into a 4.7 million, giving you a 0.2 increase, but you only benefit from the 0.1 increase in the price when you sell on that player. Of course, if you want to buy them back again, don't forget that that price then sticks at their new price option. So picking out those potential price increases of those 4.5 million defenders is very important and one to do a lot of research on. Now, moving on to our midfielders. Usually in that 3-4-3 formation or that 3-5-2 formation, your midfielders are very, very important. It tends to be 2 very expensive midfielders then 2 supporting midfielders, and then 1 fourth midfielder who tends to be at that 4.5 option. So the prices tend to be around the 11-12 mark, then down to 8.5, somewhere in that bracket, and then of course a 5.5 and a 4.5 as the 2 final options in that 5 midfielder positions. 2 very important aspects of this midfielder choice is the captains. Again, if you haven't seen the captains video that I did, please go ahead and tap that link there. But those 2 premium midfield picks tend to be your rotation captains. In this year's FPL, it looks like it's going to be between Salah and Bruno Fernandes, and they will tend to be your most captain picks. Now, the next 2 midfielders range from that 10 to maybe 7.5, and if you're lucky, 6.5 million. Those 2 alternative options are very, very important. And when you set your first game week, just make sure that you have enough funds there to change out different players. In this instance, you have some very good 6 and 6.5 options, and there's also a critical aspect here to look for those defenders that are playing in midfield positions. Over the last 2 years, that has tended to be the likes of Lundstrom and as well Dallas. That bench fodder option at 4.5, if it is actually a midfielder who will be sitting on your bench, i.e. playing 4 in the midfield, is a very, very important player position. If you see a 4.5 million midfielder accumulating a lot of points in those first few weeks, you want to bring that player in as soon as you can, making those premium selections even more important because you don't want to have to be rotating those players out. Instead, you want to be looking at that diamond differential, that 4.5 million midfielder. Now moving on to our forwards. What I can see from the Opta stats, I'll bring that figure up to you, is that there's not a lot of rotation within that forward line, meaning that it's tend to be pick and stick sort of mentality. There's always been a spread of premium pick, then down to around between 8 and 10 or even 8 and 11 depending, and then normally a bench fodder option of 4.5 million for an attacker. However, if you found that 4.5 million midfielder that you want to bring in as the 5th option is playing a lot, then you don't have to worry about that bench fodder attacker. However, if that 4.5 million midfielder is not performing, you may have to pick your premium forward and then pick a slightly less expensive second option in the range of 6 to 7.5 million in order to allow another 6, maybe a 5.5 to 6 million other forward option. In this year's case, there are some very good options which I'll be diving into future videos. So if you're new, remember, and if you found the information useful today, hit that subscribe, hit that like, as well as the notification bell, so you know when we'll be releasing that video, of which we'll be diving into specific players at specific price points that you should maybe be looking at. During the season, you get the opportunity to have 2 wildcards. Now, the first wildcard is a little bit more difficult to predict than the second, as we can see in the graphic here of when our top 50 managers have been using that wildcard. The first wildcard seems to be anywhere between the 4th and the 9th game week. Why? Well, FPL managers have picked teams that they think are the best for at least 4 to 6 game weeks ahead, meaning that they've planned and looked at fixtures and normally front load their teams and bring in the best attackers for those first 4 to 6 game weeks. After that 4 to 6 game weeks, they tend to wildcard and bring in defenders who have shown that they are very good price points and are giving them attacking returns. Now, there are a few new managers in the Premier League this season, meaning that not everyone knows exactly which formations certain managers will be going for. Your defenders tend to be the ones that may be in those attacking wingback positions, bringing you the most attacking returns. And realistically, we don't know those until we've seen a few different options. Now, up to 6 game weeks gives you 3 home and 3 away fixtures, really to decide where those best defenders are, and that spread tends to give you a good opportunity. Some managers have waited as late as game week 8 and game week 9 before they've used their first wildcard. Now, there's pros and cons to this. If you use your wildcard too early, you tend then to have to take hits later on down the line to bring in other players who are now outperforming those initial knee-jerk reactions to bringing in different players. The pro, of course, to waiting longer is that you have more data to look at. You also have players who perhaps are not just a one-hit wonder in terms of how their form is, and they tend to show form over a longer period of time, really solidifying them in their starting lineups, particularly those 4.5 million options we spoke about before. Now, the second wildcard is available to you after game week 22. And the second wildcard tends to be used in conjunction with some of your other chips, mainly the bench boost and the free hit options. And it tends to be used before those double game weeks later on in the season, because you can't use your wildcard in combination with one of your chips. So therefore, meaning normally you use your wildcard the game week before you use your bench boost, meaning that you bring in as many of those good players as you possibly can and making that bench boost option available to you so that you can maximize those points. As I spoke about on the previous video, you can get 16 points from your bench just because they appear in 2 games over that double game week, even without scoring a goal. Now, I have spoken briefly about rotation. It wasn't one of our 3 main aspects in today's video, but I would like to touch upon it. The key rotations that I have seen from the OptiStats on Fantasy Football Fix, which I'll show you a graphic of now, is the rotation between the goalkeepers, particularly if you go for a 4.5 and a 4.5 option and rotating them between home and away fixtures. Have a look at the fixtures and find 2 goalkeepers that do rotate that way. One of the keys here, of course, is some of the North London derbies. They don't have players playing in London at the same time, and as well, of course, those Manchester games. So Manchester City, Manchester United. Unfortunately, you're probably not going to find a 4.5 million starting defender either at Man City or at Man United, but those are ideas for you to see. Dean Henderson may be coming in as the Man United main number 1 goalkeeper. We don't know yet, but we will have to wait and see. But just so you are aware, using that goalkeeper rotation, have a look at the fixtures rather, and you can see what I'm talking about. Another important rotation aspect is the rotation of your captains. Now, if you can see within the graphic here that I'm about to put up, most of your captains are really in the midfield positions, at least from the data that we have from the top 50 managers. In the past, it's been, of course, Salah, Bruno Fernandes, Kevin De Bruyne, Sterling, Mane. These have been your top picks over the seasons. Now, if you have both Mane and Salah perhaps in your team, rotating those captains may not be of much difference. But if you're rotating home and away fixtures, that's where the difference can be. Like I just mentioned before, normally the Manchester games are home and away alternatives. So the Manchester United will be at home and Manchester City will be away. So if you have Bruno Fernandes in your team, for example, and the likes of Kevin De Bruyne or a Sterling, etc., you can then rotate those home and away fixtures without really even thinking about it. Now, I hope you found the video interesting today, and if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to leave them in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And of course, I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.